Thank you so much for visiting our channel. We add inspirational and motivational videos on a daily basis. Please let us know in the comments what you think of this video. If you enjoy our videos, please subscribe. This helps our channel to grow, bringing you even more inspiration. Now, enjoy our latest video. It was one of those evenings that felt colder than the temperature itself. The streets of the city bustled with people heading home, their faces buried in scarves, their breaths fogging up the air. The neon glow of shop signs flickered against the early winter darkness, casting long shadows over the sidewalks. Sarah walked briskly, clutching her daughter Emily close. Her cheeks stung from the cold, and her eyes darted nervously to her watch. She had less than an hour to reach the shelter before it closed its doors for the night. Her old car, which had been her lifeline for months, had broken down just a few blocks away. Every step felt heavier than the last. Emily's tiny hands wrapped around her neck, and the little girl murmured sleepily, "Mommy, I'm hungry." Sarah bit her lip to stop herself from crying. She had no answers left, no money, no solutions. Only a desperate hope that somehow she could make it through this night. As she turned a corner, her eyes caught a figure sitting alone on a park bench. A man, bundled in a thin, tattered jacket, sat with his hands cupped around a steaming coffee cup. His hair was streaked with gray, and his shoes were so worn that holes peeked through. A small plastic bag sat by his feet, likely holding everything he owned. Sarah hesitated, unsure why she felt drawn to him. Perhaps it was his eyes, kind, weary, but observant. As she passed, he called out, his voice rough but gentle. "Miss, are you okay?" She froze, startled by the question. People didn't ask her that anymore. They either judged her silently or looked the other way. Sarah began, unsure of how much to say. But something about his gaze made her feel safe. She found herself spilling everything, the broken car, the dwindling coins in her pocket, her fear of not making it to the shelter in time. The man, James, listened without interrupting. His own life had been a series of heartbreaks. Once a skilled carpenter, he had lost his job and home after a car accident left him unable to work for months. The bills piled up, and soon after, he lost his family too. He had been on the streets for 2 years, enduring cold nights, empty stomachs, and the piercing loneliness that came with being invisible. As Sarah finished her story, James nodded slowly. He reached for the small cup beside him, which held a mix of crumpled bills and loose change, his earnings from an entire day of asking for help. Without hesitation, he held it out to her. "Here," he said, his voice steady. "Take this. It's not much, but it should be enough for a cab." Sarah stared at him, her heart breaking and swelling at the same time. "I can't take this," she whispered, her eyes welling with tears. "You need it more than I do." James shook his head, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "You have a little one to take care of. That's more important than anything I need." Her hands trembled as she accepted the money, the weight of his sacrifice overwhelming her. "Thank you," she said, her voice cracking. "I'll never forget this." James watched as she disappeared into the night, holding her daughter tightly. He sat back on the bench, shivering against the cold but feeling strangely warm inside. The next morning, Sarah shared their encounter on social media. Her words painted a vivid picture of James's kindness, how a man with so little could give so much. She described his selflessness in detail, ending her post with, "The world needs more people like James." The story exploded. Comments poured in from people across the country, some offering prayers, others asking how they could help. A local journalist picked up the story, and within days, a charity found James at the park bench where he often stayed. The outpouring of support was overwhelming. Donations provided James with a warm apartment, new clothes, and even a chance to return to work through a job training program. For the first time in years, James felt hope blooming in his heart. When Sarah and Emily visited him in his new home, James struggled to hold back tears. Emily ran up to him, wrapping her tiny arms around his legs. "Thank you for helping my mommy," she said with a smile. James knelt down to her level, his voice thick with emotion. "You and your mommy gave me more than I gave you." Sarah wiped her eyes and said, "You reminded me, and so many others, that kindness can change everything." That night, as James sat in his small but cozy apartment, he thought about the strange turn of events. He had offered his last dollar thinking it was a small gesture, but it had created ripples he could never have imagined. Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can spark a chain of events that transforms lives, not just one, but many. And for James, that single act didn't just save Sarah and Emily, it gave him back his life.